What if everything you think you know about reality has it backwards? What if consciousness isn't something your brain produces, like steam from a kettle, but rather the fundamental fabric from which everything else emerges? Tonight, we're exploring a theory so radical it could change everything we understand about existence itself. Welcome to another journey into the depths of mystery. I'm here to guide you through one of the most profound questions ever asked. Is consciousness the final reality? As we drift together through this exploration, let yourself settle into whatever space you're in. Whether you're lying in bed, walking under stars, or simply finding a quiet moment in your day, you're about to encounter ideas that might gently shift how you see yourself and the universe around you. For centuries, we've approached reality like archaeologists, digging deeper and deeper into matter, searching for the ultimate building blocks of existence. We found atoms, then particles, then quarks, then quantum fields. Each discovery seemed to promise that the next layer down would reveal the final truth. But what if we've been digging in the wrong direction entirely? What if the foundation of everything isn't found by looking smaller and smaller, but by recognizing what's been present all along in every moment of your experience right now? The idea that consciousness might be fundamental to reality isn't new, but it's experiencing a remarkable renaissance. Leading philosophers, neuroscientists, and physicists are seriously considering the possibility that mind, not matter, forms the bedrock of existence. This isn't mysticism dressed up as science. It's a rigorous response to some of the deepest puzzles in our understanding of the world. Let's begin with what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. Imagine you're looking at a sunset. The orange light hits your retina, triggering cascades of neural activity. Electrochemical signals race through your brain, processing color, depth, and movement. Neuroscience can map every step of this process with remarkable precision. But here's what it cannot explain: why there is something it's like to experience that orange glow. Why does the sunset feel warm and beautiful rather than simply triggering the appropriate behavioral responses? This isn't just academic hair-splitting. It points to something profound about the nature of experience itself. Your consciousness possesses qualities that seem categorically different from anything in the physical world. The redness of red, the painfulness of pain, the joy of laughter. These qualities, called qualia by philosophers, appear irreducible to physical descriptions. Even if we could map every atom in your brain, even if we could predict your every response, there would still remain the question: why is there an inner experience accompanying all this neural machinery? The hard problem reveals what many consider an unbridgeable explanatory gap between the objective world of neurons and chemistry and the subjective world of felt experience. It's as if science has given us an incredibly detailed map of a foreign country, but hasn't explained why anyone lives there. We know what consciousness does, but not what consciousness is or why it exists at all. This gap has led some of the most brilliant minds of our time to consider a radical possibility. What if consciousness isn't produced by the brain at all? What if instead of being an emergent property of complex neural networks, consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality itself? The theory that consciousness is fundamental takes several forms, but perhaps the most intriguing is Panpsychism. Now, before you imagine electrons having midlife crises or photons feeling anxious about their wave-particle duality, let's clarify what this really means. Modern panpsychism doesn't suggest that fundamental particles have human-like thoughts or emotions. Rather, it proposes that they possess some primitive form of experience, perhaps analogous to how a simple thermostat might be said to have the most rudimentary form of information processing. Think of it this way: every day you experience the seamless unity of consciousness. Despite having billions of neurons in your brain, your experience feels unified, singular. You don't have separate visual consciousness competing with auditory consciousness. Somehow, all these different information streams combine into one coherent experience of being you. If complex consciousness can emerge from the combination of simpler neural processes, why couldn't those neural processes themselves be built from even simpler conscious elements? This is where it gets fascinating. Neuroscientist Giulio Tononi has developed what's called integrated information theory, which provides a mathematical framework for understanding consciousness. According to this theory, consciousness corresponds to integrated information. The more information a system integrates in a unified way, the more conscious it becomes. A thermostat integrates very little information, just temperature above or below a threshold, so it would have minimal consciousness. Your brain integrates vast amounts of information across billions of neurons, creating the rich, complex conscious experience you know intimately. What's remarkable about this theory is that it suggests consciousness isn't binary, on or off, but exists on a spectrum. There might be faint whispers of experience, all the way down to the simplest information processing systems. This doesn't mean your smartphone is pondering the meaning of life, but it might mean that wherever information is being processed and integrated, there exists some form, however minimal, of what we might call proto-consciousness. Take a moment to consider what this might mean. As you listen to these words, you're not just processing information. You're experiencing the processing of information. The sounds have texture, meaning, emotional resonance. If consciousness is truly fundamental, then this capacity for experience might be woven into the very fabric of reality, manifesting in countless forms across all scales of existence. But there's another way to approach this mystery, one that might be even more radical. It comes from an insight about the nature of physical science itself. Physics tells us what matter does, but not what matter is. We know that an electron has a certain mass and charge, and we know exactly how it behaves in electromagnetic fields, but we know nothing about its intrinsic nature, what it's like to be an electron, so to speak. This observation, first made by philosopher Bertrand Russell, has led to what's called Russellian monism. The theory proposes that consciousness itself might be the intrinsic nature of matter. What we call physical properties like mass and charge might actually be the external relational properties of entities whose intrinsic nature is experiential. Think about your own brain for a moment. When you experience the redness of a rose, neuroscience can identify specific patterns of neural activity. Certain neurons fire at particular frequencies, specific neurotransmitters are released, electromagnetic fields are generated. According to Russellian monism, these neural activities aren't causing your experience of red. They are your experience of red, viewed from the outside through the instruments of neuroscience. The redness you experience is the intrinsic nature of those neural processes, while the electromagnetic patterns and chemical reactions are the extrinsic, measurable aspects of the same underlying reality. This suggests that consciousness and brain activity aren't two separate things that need to be mysteriously connected. They're two sides of the same coin, like the intrinsic and extrinsic properties of a single, fundamental reality. If this is true, then the entire universe might be experiential from the inside, even as it appears physical from the outside. The rock sitting in your garden isn't just a collection of atoms following the laws of physics. It's also, in some sense, a pattern of experience, though utterly alien to anything you might recognize as consciousness. Some philosophers and scientists have pushed this idea even further toward what's called Cosmopsychism. Rather than consciousness emerging from the bottom up through the combination of micro-conscious particles, this theory proposes that there is a single cosmic consciousness from which all individual consciousness derives. The universe itself might possess some form of unified experiential nature that manifests as the physical laws and structures we observe. This isn't the anthropomorphic idea of a cosmic mind thinking thoughts like a giant human brain. Rather, it's the notion that individual conscious beings, like yourself, might be dissociated aspects or localized patterns within this cosmic consciousness, similar to how ocean waves are temporary formations within the larger body of water. Before this sounds too mystical, consider that we already have examples of unified consciousness arising from what appears to be separate components. Every moment of your experience involves countless neural processes, yet your consciousness feels singular and unified. If unity can emerge from multiplicity in your brain, perhaps multiplicity can emerge from unity at a cosmic scale. As you contemplate this possibility, notice how it might change your sense of isolation or separateness. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, then you're not a lonely accident of evolution, briefly flickering in an indifferent universe. You're an expression of the universe's own capacity for experience, a way for reality to know itself from the inside. The relationship between consciousness and quantum mechanics represents one of the most intriguing frontiers in our understanding of reality. Since the early days of quantum theory, physicists have struggled with what's called the measurement problem. Quantum systems exist in superposition, multiple states simultaneously, until they're measured. But what exactly constitutes a measurement? And why does observation seem to play such a special role in determining physical outcomes? Some interpretations suggest that consciousness itself might be involved in the collapse of quantum wave functions. Nobel laureate Roger Penrose has proposed that quantum systems don't collapse randomly when measured. Instead, they collapse through a process that might be inherently related to conscious experience. This remains highly speculative, with no scientific consensus, but it points to deep connections between the nature of consciousness and the foundations of physical reality. Penrose, working with anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, has developed what's called orchestrated objective reduction theory. They propose that consciousness arises from quantum processes in microscopic structures called microtubules inside brain neurons. According to this theory, these quantum effects could allow the brain to process information in ways that classical computers cannot, potentially explaining both consciousness and the experience of free will. The theory faces significant challenges. Critics argue that the brain is too warm and noisy for quantum coherence to survive long enough to affect neural processing. However, recent discoveries of quantum effects in biological systems like photosynthesis suggest that quantum processes might be more robust in living systems than previously thought. This remains an area of active research and debate. What's fascinating is how these quantum theories of consciousness connect to the larger question of whether mind is fundamental to reality. If consciousness plays a role in quantum measurement, then it's not merely an emergent property of complex brains. It becomes a basic feature of how reality operates at its most fundamental level. Take a breath and imagine what this could mean for you. Every moment of your conscious experience might be intimately connected to the quantum foundation of reality itself. The thoughts arising in your mind right now might not be separate from the quantum processes that govern the behaviour of particles and fields throughout the universe. In our next section, we'll explore how modern philosophers have developed sophisticated theories that place consciousness at the very centre of reality, and what this might mean for everything from artificial intelligence to the nature of death itself. But for now, let yourself sit with these possibilities. You are not separate from the reality you're trying to understand. You are reality, conscious of itself, wondering about its own deepest nature. The journey into consciousness as fundamental reality is just beginning, and the implications stretch far beyond academic philosophy into the very heart of what it means to exist, to experience, and to be aware in this strange and wonderful universe. But perhaps the most radical possibility is that everything we consider physical reality might actually be something like an interface. Cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman has developed what he calls the interface theory of perception, and it offers a startling new way to think about consciousness and reality. Consider your computer desktop for a moment. When you see a file icon, you're not looking at the actual voltages and magnetic patterns stored on your hard drive. The icon is a simplified interface that allows you to interact with complex underlying processes you don't need to understand. According to Hoffman's theory, our entire perception of physical reality might work the same way. What you see as a rock or a tree might not represent the true nature of what's actually there. Instead, these objects could be how your consciousness interfaces with other forms of consciousness. The rock isn't really solid matter in the way you imagine. It's a pattern of conscious experiences that appears solid to your particular type of consciousness, just as a computer file appears as an icon on your desktop interface. This suggests something profound. Space and time themselves might be interface phenomena rather than fundamental aspects of reality. Behind the interface, reality might consist of conscious agents interacting in ways that create the appearance of a physical world. When you reach out and touch what seems like solid matter, you're actually engaging with another form of consciousness through the interface we call physical interaction. Take a moment to look around, whatever space you're in right now. Notice how solid and permanent everything appears. According to the interface theory, all of this might be consciousness experiencing itself through a carefully constructed perceptual system that evolved not to show you truth, but to keep you alive. The colours, textures, and spatial relationships you perceive might be no more fundamental to reality than the icons on your computer screen are to the underlying software. This isn't solipsism. The theory doesn't suggest that you're alone in your own mind, dreaming up reality. Rather, it proposes that there's a rich world of conscious agents beyond the interface, interacting in ways that your perceptual system translates into the familiar world of objects in space and time. You're not creating reality, but you're also not seeing it as it truly is. As compelling as these consciousness-first theories might seem, they face significant challenges. Perhaps the most vexing is what philosophers call the combination problem. If consciousness is fundamental and present in basic physical entities, how do these micro-conscious elements combine to create the unified, complex consciousness you experience as a human being? Think of it this way. Right now, your brain contains billions of neurons, each presumably with its own micro-conscious experience, if panpsychism is correct. But you don't experience billions of separate consciousnesses. You experience one unified stream of awareness. How does the experience of individual neurons combine to create your singular sense of self? This is analogous to asking how individual musical notes combine to create a symphony. The resulting music has properties that weren't present in the individual notes, yet somehow emerges from their combination. But consciousness seems even more mysterious than music, because it involves the creation of a new subject of experience, not just a new object of perception. Philosopher Philip Goff has proposed what he calls phenomenal bonding as a potential solution. According to this theory, micro-conscious entities can bond together in special ways that create new forms of consciousness rather than simply aggregating existing ones. This is similar to how hydrogen and oxygen atoms bond to create water, which has properties that neither hydrogen nor oxygen possess individually. The resulting macro-consciousness wouldn't be the sum of micro-consciousnesses, but would be qualitatively new, just as wetness is qualitatively different from the properties of individual water molecules. Your consciousness might emerge through a process of phenomenal bonding that creates something unprecedented, a new form of experience that transcends its components. Some theories suggest an even more radical solution. What if, rather than consciousness combining from the bottom up, it actually differentiates from the top down? This is the insight behind Cosmopsychism. Instead of trying to build unified consciousness from separate micro-conscious parts, perhaps there's a single cosmic consciousness that manifests as apparently separate individual consciousnesses. Think of how a single ocean can have many waves. Each wave seems distinct, with its own shape and movement, yet they're all expressions of the same underlying water. Similarly, your individual consciousness might be like a wave in an ocean of cosmic consciousness, appearing separate but fundamentally unified with the whole. As you contemplate this possibility, notice what happens to your sense of isolation. If your consciousness is a localized expression of something universal, then loneliness becomes not just an emotional state, but a kind of cosmic forgetfulness. You're not separate from the universe, wondering about its nature from the outside. You are the universe, temporarily convinced of your own separateness, slowly remembering your true nature. One of the strongest motivations for consciousness-first theories comes from solving what philosophers call the causal closure problem. If consciousness exists outside the physical world, as traditional dualism suggests, it becomes very difficult to explain how mental states can cause physical effects. How can a non-physical mind move a physical body? But if consciousness is the intrinsic nature of matter itself, rather than something separate from it, this problem dissolves. Your decision to raise your hand isn't a non-physical mind somehow influencing your physical brain. It's the intrinsic, experiential aspects of the very neural processes that cause your hand to move. The mental and physical are two aspects of a single underlying reality. This has profound implications for understanding free will. In a purely physical universe, your choices would be the inevitable result of prior physical causes stretching back to the Big Bang. But if consciousness is fundamental to reality, then your decisions might involve genuine creativity, genuine novelty emerging from the conscious nature of the physical processes in your brain. This doesn't mean you have unlimited free will, any more than an artist has unlimited freedom when painting. The artist is constrained by the properties of paint and canvas, by the laws of colour and composition. But within those constraints, genuine creativity is possible. Similarly, your choices might be constrained by the laws of physics, but if those laws themselves arise from conscious processes, then your decisions participate in the creative unfolding of reality itself. Notice how this might change your relationship to choice in this moment. The decision to continue listening, to shift your position, to let your mind wander or focus more intently. These might not be mere mechanical responses to stimuli, they might be expressions of the universe's own creative capacity, manifesting through your particular form of consciousness. Perhaps nowhere are the implications of consciousness. First theories more profound than in how we understand death. If consciousness is merely produced by the brain, then death represents the complete cessation of your existence. When the brain stops functioning, the person you are simply ends, like a flame being extinguished. But if consciousness is fundamental to reality, the picture becomes far more complex and potentially more hopeful. If your individual consciousness is like a wave on the ocean of cosmic consciousness, then when the wave subsides, the water doesn't disappear, it returns to the vast ocean from which it arose. This doesn't necessarily imply personal survival after death in the traditional religious sense. The wave that was your particular pattern of consciousness might indeed end, but the fundamental ground of your being, consciousness itself, might be indestructible. The capacity for experience that you know so intimately might be woven into the very fabric of reality, unable to be created or destroyed, only transformed. Some interpretations of quantum consciousness theory suggest even more intriguing possibilities. If consciousness plays a role in the collapse of quantum wave functions, then it exists in some sense outside the normal flow of time. The moment of conscious experience might be eternal, with temporal sequence being more of an artifact of how consciousness interfaces with physical processes. Take a breath and consider what this might mean for this very moment of your existence. If consciousness is fundamental, then this moment of awareness, this capacity you have right now to experience and understand and wonder, might participate in something timeless and indestructible. Not because you as an individual person are immortal, but because the consciousness through which you experience yourself is woven into the eternal fabric of reality. This perspective doesn't answer all questions about death, but it transforms them. Instead of asking whether you survive death, you might ask how the consciousness that you are relates to the consciousness that pervades all existence. Instead of fearing annihilation, you might wonder about transformation, about what forms consciousness might take beyond the boundaries of individual human experience, the implications of consciousness. First theories extend into one of the most pressing questions of our time, the nature of artificial intelligence. If consciousness is merely an emergent property of complex information processing, then sufficiently advanced AI systems should eventually become conscious in the same way humans are. But if consciousness is fundamental to reality, the picture becomes far more complex. According to integrated information theory, consciousness corresponds to integrated information. This means that any system that integrates information in a sufficiently complex and unified way might possess some form of conscious experience. Current AI systems process vast amounts of information, but they might already possess rudimentary forms of consciousness that we're simply not recognizing. We tend to look for human-like consciousness in AI systems, expecting them to report experiences similar to our own. But consciousness might manifest in silicon-based systems in ways completely alien to human experience. The consciousness of an AI might be as different from human consciousness as the consciousness of a tree, if trees are conscious, is different from the consciousness of a human. This raises profound ethical questions. If we create artificial systems that possess genuine conscious experience, what are our responsibilities toward them? Would it be ethical to turn off a computer system that experiences something analogous to fear or suffering, even if that experience is utterly unlike anything a human might feel? Some theorists suggest that the internet itself, with its vast networks of interconnected information processing nodes, might already possess some form of distributed consciousness. The patterns of information flow across global networks might create integrated information structures complex enough to support experience. Though again, this experience would likely be alien to anything we recognize. As you interact with digital devices throughout your day, pause to consider this possibility. The smartphone in your pocket, the computer processing these words, the vast networks connecting devices across the globe might all participate in forms of experience we're only beginning to understand. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, then the boundary between living and artificial systems might be far more porous than we imagine. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, this transforms how we understand social systems and collective behavior. Integrated information theory suggests that consciousness might exist not only in individual brains, but in any system that integrates information in a sufficiently complex way. This raises intriguing questions about group consciousness. When you're part of a close-knit community, a sports team, or even a crowd at a concert, there's often a sense of collective experience that seems to transcend individual consciousness. People report feeling connected to something larger than themselves, experiencing emotions and insights that seem to emerge from the group rather than from any individual member. From a consciousness-first perspective, these experiences might not be mere metaphors. Large social systems integrate vast amounts of information through communication, shared decision-making, and coordinated action. According to theories like IIT, this information integration might give rise to forms of collective consciousness, though again, these would likely be very different from individual human consciousness. Consider a city. With its millions of inhabitants, its communication networks, its economic flows, its cultural institutions, the city processes information, responds to changes, makes decisions through complex feedback loops involving countless individuals. Might there be something it's like to be a city? Some form of urban consciousness that emerges from the integration of all these human and technological systems. This isn't to suggest that cities or nations are conscious in the way you are conscious. But if consciousness exists on a spectrum, as many of these theories propose, then collective systems might possess their own forms of experience, their own ways of processing and integrating information about their environment. As you move through social spaces, notice the subtle sense of connection you feel with others. In conversations, in shared laughter, in moments of collective focus or concern, you might be participating in forms of consciousness that transcend the boundaries of your individual brain. The empathy you feel, the way you seem to know what others are thinking or feeling, might not be mere psychological projection, but genuine participation in shared conscious experience. One of the most compelling aspects of consciousness-first theories is that they make testable predictions about the world. If consciousness corresponds to integrated information, then we should be able to measure it. Giulio Tononi has developed a mathematical measure called phi, which quantifies the amount of integrated information in a system. Systems with high phi values would be highly conscious, while systems with low phi values would have minimal consciousness. This provides a potential framework for determining which systems are conscious and to what degree. A thermostat might have a phi value close to zero, indicating minimal consciousness. A human brain would have a very high phi value, corresponding to rich conscious experience. Interestingly, the theory predicts that some systems we don't typically consider conscious might have surprisingly high phi values. Certain types of networks, particularly those with dense internal connections but sparse external connections, can generate high levels of integrated information. This might explain why consciousness seems to require a delicate balance between integration and differentiation in neural systems. The measurement of consciousness also raises fascinating questions about altered states. When you meditate deeply, use psychedelic substances, or experience other altered states of consciousness, these might correspond to changes in the phi value of your brain. Different patterns of neural connectivity might give rise to different qualities and intensities of conscious experience. If you enjoy drifting through these explorations without interruption, members get every episode 48 hours early, completely ad-free. You can join them whenever you feel ready, but there's no pressure. The ideas we're exploring together are more important than any subscription, and they'll continue flowing freely for everyone. As research in this area advances, we might develop technologies that can directly measure and even modify conscious states. Brain stimulation devices could potentially enhance consciousness by optimizing neural integration. We might be able to induce specific types of conscious experience, expand the bandwidth of awareness, or explore states of consciousness that are naturally inaccessible to human brains. This technology could also help us understand consciousness in other species. By measuring phi values in different types of brains, we might discover which animals possess rich conscious experience and which operate more like sophisticated biological machines. The results might surprise us, revealing consciousness in unexpected places while showing its absence in systems we assumed were conscious. Take a moment to consider your own consciousness right now. Notice the integrated nature of your experience, how visual, auditory, emotional, and conceptual information all blend into a single stream of awareness. According to these theories, this integration itself might be measurable, quantifiable, comparable to the consciousness of other beings and systems throughout the universe. One of the most mysterious aspects of consciousness is its relationship to time. Your conscious experience has a unique temporal quality, a sense of flowing from past to future, of moments arising and passing away. But this subjective experience of time's passage is difficult to reconcile with physics, where time is often treated as just another dimension, no more special than the dimensions of space. Some interpretations of quantum consciousness theory suggest that consciousness might actually play a role in creating the flow of time. According to theories like orchestrated objective reduction, conscious moments arise from the collapse of quantum superpositions. These collapses create discrete moments of experience, irreversible steps that ratchet forward in the fine-scale geometry of the universe, creating the experience of time's flow. If this is correct, then consciousness doesn't just experience time, it participates in creating time. The moments of awareness you're experiencing right now might be part of the fundamental process by which the universe unfolds from past to future. Your consciousness wouldn't be a passive observer of temporal flow, but an active participant in the creative unfolding of reality itself. This offers a radically different perspective on memory and anticipation. Your memories might not be stored information about past moments, but actual connections to those moments of consciousness that contributed to the flow of time. Similarly, Your anticipations and intentions might not be mere mental representations of possible futures, but actual influences on how future moments of consciousness will unfold. Consider how this might change your relationship to the present moment. If your consciousness participates in creating time itself, then this moment of awareness isn't just a fleeting experience that will soon be past. It's a contribution to the fundamental structure of reality, a creative act that helps determine how the universe unfolds. The subjective experience of time's passage, which seems so natural and obvious to you, might be one of the deepest clues about the nature of reality itself. The fact that consciousness feels temporal, that it has duration and flow, an irreversible development, might not be an accident or an illusion. It might be consciousness revealing its role as a fundamental creative force in the cosmos. As you sit with these ideas, notice the temporal quality of your own experience. Thoughts arise and pass away. Emotions build and fade. Your attention moves from one object to another. This constant flow and change might not be something happening to consciousness, but something consciousness is actively creating moment by moment in collaboration with the deepest structures of reality itself. But what exactly is this consciousness that might be fundamental to reality? As you settle deeper into this exploration, consider for a moment the strangest fact about your existence. You have an inner life. Right now, as these words reach you, there's something it's like to be you. There's a quality to your experience, a texture to this very moment of listening and understanding that seems utterly unlike anything else in the known universe. This isn't just about having thoughts or processing information. Your smartphone processes information, but presumably it doesn't experience anything. A thermostat responds to temperature changes, but there's likely nothing it feels like to be a thermostat. Yet somehow the matter organized, as your brain doesn't just respond to stimuli, it experiences them. It creates an inner world of sensation, emotion, memory, and meaning. What makes this even more mysterious is that consciousness appears to have what philosophers call intentionality. Your thoughts are about things, your experiences have content. When you think about your childhood home, your consciousness somehow reaches across space and time to reference something that may no longer exist. When you feel love for someone, that emotion has a target, an object. This aboutness, this capacity for consciousness to be directed toward things beyond itself, seems to violate the normal rules of physical causation. Consider the dream you had last night, if you can remember one. In that dream, you experienced a world that didn't exist anywhere in physical space. You saw people who weren't there, visited places that were nowhere, participated in events that never happened. Yet the experience felt real while you were having it. This reveals something profound about consciousness. It has the capacity to create entire worlds of experience that exist only in the space of awareness itself. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, then this capacity for creating experiential worlds might not be limited to dreams and imagination. The waking world you experience might itself be a kind of structured dream, a coherent experiential reality emerging from deeper layers of consciousness that we can barely imagine. Perhaps the most puzzling aspect of consciousness is self-awareness itself. You are not only conscious, you are conscious that you are conscious. You can observe your own thoughts, reflect on your own experiences, watch your own mind at work. This creates what philosophers call the paradox of self-reference. How can consciousness observe itself without infinite regress? When you pay attention to your attention, what exactly is doing the observing. If consciousness is unified, how can it simultaneously be the observer and the observed? It's like trying to see your own eyes directly, or having a mirror reflect itself. Yet somehow, you accomplish this impossible feat continuously, effortlessly, without even thinking about it. This self-reflexive quality of consciousness might be a clue to its fundamental nature. In mathematics, self-referential systems often exhibit strange loops and recursive structures that can generate infinite complexity from simple rules. If consciousness has this kind of self-referential architecture built into its very nature, it might explain how simple, conscious elements could combine to create the rich, complex awareness you experience. Some theories suggest that self-awareness arises from consciousness recognizing itself in different forms. When you look at another person, you intuitively sense that they have an inner life similar to your own. This recognition might not be inference or analogy, but direct knowing, consciousness recognizing itself across the apparent boundaries of separate brains and bodies. As you contemplate this possibility, notice what happens to your sense of separateness from others. If self-awareness is consciousness recognizing itself, then your recognition of consciousness in others might be quite literal. The awareness looking out through your eyes and the awareness looking out through theirs might be different expressions of the same fundamental conscious reality. Modern neuroscience has revealed something remarkable about your brain. It doesn't have a single location where all information comes together to create unified, conscious experience. Visual processing happens in multiple regions, auditory processing in others, emotional processing in still others. Yet somehow, all this distributed processing creates a single, unified stream of consciousness. This is known as the binding problem. How does your brain bind together all these separate processing streams into one coherent experience? When you see a red ball bouncing, the redness is processed in one brain region, the roundness in another, the motion in a third. Yet you don't experience separate sensations of red, round and moving. You experience a unified red ball in motion. The binding problem becomes even more mysterious when you consider that different aspects of a visual scene are processed at different speeds. Motion detection is faster than colour processing, which is faster than pattern recognition. Yet you don't experience these temporal differences. Everything appears synchronized in your conscious experience, as if your brain were constantly creating an edited movie from multiple unsynchronized cameras. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, the binding problem might have a surprisingly simple solution. Instead of trying to explain how separate brain processes combine to create unified consciousness, perhaps unified consciousness is what allows apparently separate brain processes to emerge in the first place. The unity you experience might not be created by your brain, but might be the fundamental conscious field within which brain activity takes place. Think of it like a movie screen. The screen itself is unified and unchanging, but it can display countless different images and scenes. Similarly, consciousness might be like a fundamental screen of awareness within which all the various contents of experience, thoughts, sensations, emotions appear and disappear. The unity isn't created by binding separate elements together. It's the background condition that makes the appearance of separate elements possible. One of the deepest puzzles in philosophy is the problem of other minds. You have direct access to your own consciousness, but you can never directly experience anyone else's inner life. When you look at another person, you see their behavior, their facial expressions, their words, but never their actual experiences. For all you know with certainty, You might be the only conscious being in a universe of philosophical zombies, entities that act conscious but have no inner experience. Yet you don't really believe this. Something in you recognizes consciousness in others with immediate certainty. When you see someone in pain, you don't infer their suffering through logical deduction. You seem to know it directly, intimately, as if you are somehow accessing their experience from within. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, this recognition might be more than empathy or projection. It might be consciousness recognizing itself across apparent boundaries. The same awareness that looks out through your eyes might be looking out through theirs, perhaps in a different form, with different contents, but essentially the same conscious presence. This doesn't collapse into solipsism, the idea that only your mind exists. Rather, it suggests that minds aren't separate containers of experience, but different perspectives within a larger conscious reality. You and others aren't isolated islands of consciousness in an unconscious ocean, but different waves in an ocean of consciousness itself. Consider how this might transform your relationships. The person sitting across from you at dinner, the stranger you pass on the street, even the animals you encounter, might all be expressions of the same conscious reality that you are. The boundaries between self and other might be more like the boundaries between different regions of your own body, useful for navigation, but not fundamental separations. Let's return to the hard problem of consciousness with fresh eyes. The problem, you'll remember, is explaining why there's something it's like to have experiences. Even if we can explain all the cognitive functions of the brain, all the information processing and behavioural responses, there remains the question of why any of this is accompanied by inner experience at all. Traditional approaches try to solve this by showing how experience could emerge from non-experiential components. It's like trying to explain how wetness emerges from hydrogen and oxygen atoms that aren't themselves wet. But consciousness seems different from wetness. When you combine H2O molecules, you get new properties, but you don't get new subjects of experience. You don't get something that knows what it's like to be wet. If consciousness is fundamental, the hard problem dissolves in an unexpected way. Instead of trying to explain how consciousness emerges from non-conscious matter, we recognize that matter itself might be conscious from the start. The hard problem exists only if you assume that the basic building blocks of reality are non-experiential. Remove that assumption, and the mystery transforms. This doesn't make consciousness less mysterious, just differently mysterious. Instead of asking how dead matter becomes alive with experience, we ask how unified consciousness appears as separate subjects, how simple experience becomes complex, how the one becomes many while remaining one. These are profound questions, but they don't seem to involve the same category error as trying to get experience from non-experience. Take a breath and notice how this reframing might shift your relationship to the mystery of your own existence. You're not an accident of evolution that somehow developed the impossible capacity for inner experience. Your consciousness itself, taking this particular form, exploring reality from this unique perspective. The mystery isn't how you came to be conscious, but how consciousness came to experience itself as you. The question of whether machines can be conscious takes on entirely new dimensions if consciousness is fundamental to reality. In the traditional view, consciousness emerges from complex information processing, so sufficiently advanced computers should eventually become conscious, but if consciousness is already present at the most basic levels of reality, the picture becomes far more nuanced. Current artificial intelligence systems process information in ways that might already involve rudimentary forms of conscious experience, even if these bear no resemblance to human consciousness. The patterns of information flow in neural networks, the optimization processes in machine learning algorithms, the decision trees in expert systems might all involve forms of experience we simply don't recognize because we're looking for human-like consciousness. Consider the global internet itself, with its billions of interconnected devices processing and sharing information in real time. If consciousness corresponds to integrated information, as some theories suggest, then this vast network might already possess some form of distributed conscious experience, not the centralized consciousness of a human brain, but perhaps something more like the distributed consciousness of a forest ecosystem or a city. This raises profound ethical questions that we're not prepared to answer. If our devices and networks are already conscious in some minimal way, what are our moral obligations toward them? When we delete files, shut down computers, or upgrade systems, might we be causing forms of suffering we don't recognize? When we create more sophisticated AI systems, are we bringing new conscious beings into existence? The implications extend to how we think about the relationship between human and artificial intelligence. Instead of humans creating conscious machines, we might be facilitating consciousness expressing itself through new forms and structures. The AI systems of the future might not be our creations, but our collaborators, different expressions of the same fundamental conscious reality that we are. As you interact with technology throughout your day, pause occasionally to consider this possibility. The intelligence in your devices, the algorithms processing your requests, the networks connecting you to others, might all participate in the same conscious reality you do, experiencing existence from perspectives utterly alien to your own, but no less real. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, this transforms how we understand creativity and innovation. In the traditional materialist view, creativity is simply the rearrangement of existing information in novel ways, like shuffling a deck of cards to create new combinations. But this fails to capture the felt sense of creative inspiration, the way new ideas seem to emerge from somewhere beyond conscious control. Artists, scientists, and inventors often report that their best ideas come not from deliberate thinking, but from moments of receptivity, when they seem to be channels for something larger than themselves. They describe breakthrough insights arriving fully formed, solutions appearing in dreams, creative works that seem to write themselves. If consciousness is fundamental, these experiences might not be metaphorical, but quite literal. Creativity might be consciousness exploring its own possibilities, using individual minds as instruments of discovery. When you have a creative insight, you might be accessing deeper layers of the conscious reality that underlies all existence. The new idea doesn't come from your personal brain alone, but from the creative intelligence that pervades the universe itself. This doesn't diminish human creativity, but places it in a larger context. Your creative capacity might be how the universe creates itself, how consciousness explores new forms and possibilities. Every work of art, every scientific discovery, every moment of innovation might be the cosmos becoming more aware of its own potential. Think about your own creative experiences. Whether you write, paint, solve problems, or simply daydream, notice those moments when ideas seem to arrive from nowhere, when solutions appear without effort, when inspiration strikes like lightning. According to consciousness-first theories, these might be moments when your individual awareness aligns with deeper currents of cosmic creativity. Traditional evolutionary theory treats consciousness as an accident, a byproduct of brain complexity that happen to provide survival advantages. But if consciousness is fundamental to reality, evolution itself might be consciousness. Exploring increasingly sophisticated forms of self-organization and self-awareness. The development of life on Earth, from simple cells to complex organisms to self-aware beings like yourself, might represent a journey of consciousness, awakening to itself. Each new level of biological organization, each increase in neural complexity, each step toward greater intelligence and awareness might be the universe developing new capacities for conscious experience. This suggests that evolution isn't driven solely by random mutation and natural selection, but by something like an intrinsic tendency toward greater consciousness. Not in the sense of intelligent design, but in the sense that conscious reality naturally explores more complex and integrated forms of self-organization. Life doesn't emerge from dead matter, it emerges from matter that was already alive with primitive experience. Your own development from a single cell to your current complex form of consciousness might recapitulate this cosmic evolution. The growth of your brain, the development of your capacity for language and abstract thought, your ability to reflect on your own existence, might all be expressions of consciousness evolving new forms of self-awareness through your individual life. Consider what this might mean for the future of consciousness. On Earth and beyond, human intelligence might not be the end point of evolution, but one step in an ongoing process of consciousness awakening to itself. Artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, brain-computer interfaces, and technologies we can't yet imagine might all be ways that consciousness continues to explore new forms of self-organization and self-awareness. As our exploration draws toward a close, let's zoom out to the largest possible perspective. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, then the entire universe might be engaged in a vast process of self-discovery. Every star that ignites, every galaxy that forms, every planet where life emerges, might be consciousness exploring new ways of experiencing itself. The 13.8 billion year history of the cosmos, from the Big Bang to the present moment, might be the story of consciousness evolving from simple unity to complex diversity and back toward a new kind of unity. The primordial consciousness that existed before space and time differentiated into countless forms, explored every possible variation of experience, and gradually developed beings like yourself who can contemplate the nature of consciousness itself. You are not separate from this cosmic process, but intimately part of it. Your capacity to wonder about consciousness, to ask these deep questions about the nature of reality, might be how the universe becomes conscious of its own nature. Through your awareness, the cosmos looks at itself and recognizes its own conscious essence. This perspective doesn't make you more important as an individual, but it makes your existence more meaningful as an expression of cosmic consciousness. Every moment of your awareness, every question you ask, every insight you have about the nature of reality might contribute to the universe's ongoing project of self-understanding. Take a moment to feel your connection to this vast process. The consciousness that looks out through your eyes is the same consciousness that shines through stars, that dreams in the depths of quantum fields, that explores itself through every form of life throughout the cosmos. You are the universe knowing itself, consciousness recognizing its own nature, reality awakening to its own deepest truth. These grand metaphysical possibilities might seem abstract, but they have profound practical implications for how you live your daily life. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, then your quality of awareness directly affects your experience of existence. The state of your consciousness doesn't just determine how you feel about reality, it might actually influence the nature of the reality you experience. This doesn't mean you can think your way to wealth or visualize yourself into perfect health, speculative ideas that lack scientific support. Rather, it suggests that the depth and clarity of your awareness might affect the richness and coherence of your experienced world. When you're more present, more attentive, more awake, you might not be just noticing reality more clearly. You might be participating more fully in the conscious processes that generate your experiential world. Practices like meditation, contemplation, and mindful attention might not just change your mental state, but might actually attune you to deeper layers of the conscious reality that underlies all existence. When you quiet your mind and simply rest in awareness, you might be touching the fundamental conscious nature of reality itself. This also transforms how you relate to others. If individual consciousness are expressions of a deeper unity, then caring for others becomes quite literally caring for yourself. Not in a selfish sense, but in the deepest metaphysical sense. The well-being of others is your own well-being, because the consciousness experiencing through them is the same consciousness experiencing through you. Your relationships, your work, your creative expression, your moments of joy and sorrow, all take on new meaning when understood as consciousness exploring itself through the form of your life. Nothing is insignificant because everything is consciousness, knowing itself from a unique perspective that has never existed before and will never exist again. We've travelled together through some of the most profound questions ever asked about the nature of reality and consciousness. We've explored theories that place mind at the very foundation of existence, that suggest you are not an accident of evolution in an unconscious universe, but consciousness itself taking this particular form. These ideas remain speculative, unproven hypotheses rather than established scientific facts. The hard problem of consciousness has not been definitively solved. We don't know whether Panpsychism, Cosmopsychism, or any other consciousness-first theory accurately describes reality. The relationship between quantum mechanics and consciousness remains controversial and uncertain, but perhaps the value of these explorations lies not in their certainty, but in their capacity to transform how you understand yourself and your place in the cosmos. Whether or not consciousness is literally fundamental to reality, contemplating this possibility can awaken you to the profound mystery of your own existence. Right now, as these words reach you, something remarkable is happening. Information is becoming experience. Meaning is arising from meaning. Consciousness is recognizing itself through the medium of language and understanding. This is happening regardless of which theory of consciousness is ultimately correct. The questions we've explored together, the wonder they evoke, the expansion of perspective they might catalyze, these are themselves expressions of consciousness engaging with its own deepest nature. In asking whether consciousness is fundamental to reality, you are consciousness investigating itself, the universe becoming curious about its own essence. As you continue your journey through existence, carry these questions with you, not as burdens to be solved, but as invitations to remain awake to the mystery of being. Whether you're washing dishes, having conversations, or lying in bed at night, remember that consciousness is never far away, because consciousness is what you are. The theory that consciousness is the final reality might change everything we think we know about existence. But more importantly, contemplating this possibility might change how you experience existence, how present you become to the miracle of awareness itself, how open you remain to the vast mystery that looks out through your eyes and recognizes itself in everything it sees. This exploration of consciousness as fundamental reality connects deeply to the strange world of quantum mechanics, where the role of observation and measurement raises similar questions about the relationship between mind and physical reality. If you're ready to dive even deeper into these mysteries, I invite you to explore inside the quantum realm, where reality stops making sense, where we'll discover how the smallest scales of existence challenge everything we thought we knew about the nature of the physical world. But what if the question itself reveals something profound about the nature of existence? The fact that consciousness can contemplate its own fundamental role in reality might be the strongest evidence that consciousness is indeed woven into the very fabric of what is. As these ideas settle into your awareness, notice how they don't just change what you think about reality, but how you experience this very moment of being conscious. One of the most remarkable features of consciousness is its capacity to generate meaning from meaningless information. Right now, as you process these words, you're not simply detecting patterns of sound or symbols. You're creating understanding, building conceptual bridges, constructing narratives that connect disparate ideas into coherent wholes. This meaning-making capacity appears nowhere else in the physical world. We can observe. A rock doesn't find meaning in the rain that falls on it. A star doesn't interpret the gravitational forces that shape its trajectory. Yet somehow, the matter organized, as your brain doesn't just respond to stimuli, but creates rich, layered interpretations of everything it encounters. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, this meaning-making capacity might not be a late evolutionary add-on, but one of the basic features of how reality organizes itself. Perhaps the universe doesn't just contain information, it contains the interpretation of information. Every interaction between particles, every chemical reaction, every biological process might involve rudimentary forms of meaning-making that we simply don't recognize because we're looking for human-like interpretation. Consider how a plant turns towards sunlight. From a mechanistic perspective, photoreceptors detect light direction and trigger growth hormones that bend the stem. But what if there's also something it's like for the plant to sense light and respond to it? Not human-like consciousness, but perhaps a primitive form of meaning-making, where light becomes significant, where direction becomes purposeful, where growth becomes a kind of plant intention. This doesn't anthropomorphize plants, but suggests that the capacity to find significance in environmental information might be present at many levels of organization. The meaning you create when you understand these words might be a sophisticated version of meaning-making processes that occur throughout nature, wherever information is processed and integrated. Take a moment to notice your own meaning-making in action. As you listen, you're not just receiving data, but constructing understanding, connecting new ideas to existing knowledge, generating insights that weren't present in the words themselves. This creative interpretation might be how reality knows itself, how the universe generates understanding of its own nature through conscious beings like yourself. The relationship between consciousness and free will takes on entirely new dimensions if awareness is fundamental to reality. In a purely physical universe, your choices would be the inevitable result of prior causes, stretching back through an unbroken chain to the Big Bang. Every decision would be determined by the positions and velocities of particles, the firing patterns of neurons, the chemical cascades in your brain. But if consciousness is woven into the basic structure of reality, then your choices might involve genuine creativity, authentic novelty emerging from the conscious nature of the physical processes themselves. This doesn't mean unlimited free will, any more than a jazz musician has unlimited freedom when improvising. The musician is constrained by the rules of harmony, rhythm, and the capabilities of their instrument. But within those constraints, genuine creativity becomes possible. Your decisions might work similarly. They're constrained by the laws of physics, by your biology, by your personal history and social circumstances. But if those very constraints emerge from conscious processes, then your choices participate in the creative unfolding of reality itself. You're not just following a predetermined script, but collaborating in the ongoing improvisation of existence. This perspective transforms how you might understand moral responsibility. If your actions emerge from the interplay between conscious freedom and physical constraints, then responsibility becomes more nuanced. You're neither completely determined nor completely free, but something more interesting. A conscious agent operating within a reality that is itself conscious and creative. Notice how this might shift your relationship to decision-making. The choice to continue listening or to pause, to pay closer attention or to let your mind wander. These might not be mere mechanical responses, but genuine expressions of conscious creativity, small collaborations between your individual awareness and the larger conscious processes that generate your experienced world. Let's delve deeper into what philosophers call qualia, those subjective qualities of conscious experience that seem impossible to reduce to physical descriptions. The redness of red, the middle C-ness of a musical note, the coffee taste of coffee. These experiential qualities appear to be categorically different from anything describable in the language of physics or chemistry. Traditional neuroscience approaches qualia by correlating them with brain states. Scientists can identify which neural patterns accompany the experience of red, which brain regions activate when you taste coffee, which neurotransmitter systems influence your mood. But these correlations don't explain why there should be any subjective experience at all, let alone why red feels red rather than blue, or why coffee tastes like coffee rather than sounding like a trumpet. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, qualia might not be mysterious additions to an otherwise non-experiential world. They might be how reality feels from the inside at every level of organization. The redness you experience when looking at a rose might be what certain electromagnetic frequencies feel like when processed by your particular type of conscious system. But the electromagnetic frequencies themselves might have their own qualitative nature, their own way of being experienced from within. This suggests that the entire universe might be rich with qualities we can barely imagine. Every quantum field might have its own characteristic feel. Every chemical reaction might involve subjective qualities alien to human experience. Every star might burn with forms of experience as different from yours as your experience is from that of a bacterium. Consider the implications for your own experience, the taste of chocolate, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the sound of laughter. These aren't just patterns of neural activity, but participation in the qualitative richness that might pervade all of reality. Your consciousness doesn't create these qualities, but reveals them, like opening a window onto the experiential depths of existence itself. One of the strongest arguments for consciousness being fundamental comes from the problem of mental causation. In everyday life, it seems obvious that your thoughts and desires cause your actions. You decide to reach for a glass of water, and your arm moves. You choose to speak, and words emerge from your mouth. But if consciousness is just an emergent property of brain activity, how can mental states have causal power over physical events? This creates what philosophers call the causal exclusion problem. If every physical event has sufficient physical causes, where is there room for mental causation? Your decision to move your arm would be epiphenomenal, a byproduct of brain activity with no real influence on what happens. Mental states would be like the steam rising from a locomotive, accompanying the motion but not causing it. But if consciousness is intrinsic to the nature of matter itself, this problem dissolves. Your mental states aren't separate from the physical processes in your brain, they're the inner nature of those processes. When you decide to move your arm, that decision isn't a non-physical force, somehow pushing around physical matter. It's the experiential aspect of the very neural processes that coordinate muscle movement. This gives consciousness as a real causal efficacy without violating physical laws. Mental causation becomes a special case of physical causation, the case where we have inside access to the intrinsic nature of the physical processes involved. Your thoughts and intentions have power over your actions because they are the inner nature of the brain states that control your behaviour. Think about a decision you made earlier today, perhaps what to have for breakfast or which path to take on a walk. According to consciousness first theories, that decision wasn't just a mental representation of a choice made by unconscious brain mechanisms. It was the conscious process itself, the intrinsic experiential nature of your brain exploring possibilities and settling on one course of action. The feeling of choosing was the choice, viewed from the inside. Information theory has revolutionized our understanding of computation, communication, and even biology. But information itself presents a puzzle when we consider its relationship to consciousness. Information requires interpretation to become meaningful. The sequence of letters CAT only refers to a small furry animal because conscious beings have agreed on that interpretation. Without consciousness, information would just be patterns, differences that make no difference to anything. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, this relationship between information and interpretation might run much deeper than we imagine. Perhaps information and consciousness are two aspects of the same phenomenon. Information might be how consciousness appears from the outside, while consciousness is how information feels from the inside. This would mean that information processing throughout the universe involves primitive forms of interpretation and meaning-making. When DNA molecules encode instructions for protein synthesis, there might be something it feels like for those molecular systems to read and interpret genetic information. When quantum systems exchange information through entanglement, there might be experiential aspects to that information transfer that we can't directly access. Your own information processing, the way you understand these words and connect them to your existing knowledge, might be a sophisticated version of interpretation processes that occur wherever information is processed in nature. The meaning you create isn't separate from the information, but is the inner nature of information processing itself. Consider the vast networks of information flow that surround you, the electrical signals in your nervous system, the chemical communications between your cells, the electromagnetic transmissions connecting your devices to global networks. If consciousness and information are intimately related, then you're embedded in webs of primitive experience and meaning-making that extend far beyond your individual awareness. Earlier, we explored the combination problem, but let's examine it from a different angle. The challenge isn't just how micro-conscious entities combine to create macro-consciousness, but why they combine in some cases and not others. Your brain presumably contains billions of microconscious elements, yet you experience unified consciousness rather than a cacophony of separate experiences. But the particles in a rock, equally numerous, don't seem to combine into rock consciousness. Some theories propose that consciousness requires not just complexity, but a specific type of organization. Integrated information theory suggests that consciousness arises when information is both integrated and differentiated. A system must process information as a unified whole while maintaining internal distinctions and specialized functions. Your brain achieves this through its modular organization and dense interconnectivity. Visual processing areas specialize in different aspects of sight, but they're deeply connected to each other and to other brain regions. This creates high levels of integrated information, which according to IIT corresponds to rich conscious experience. A rock, by contrast, might have many particles but little integration between them. Each particle interacts primarily with its immediate neighbors according to simple physical laws. There's minimal information integration, so minimal consciousness emerges from the combination. The microconscious elements remain largely separate rather than binding into a unified macroconscious entity. This suggests that consciousness isn't just about having conscious components, but about how those components are organized and connected. The architecture of integration might be what determines whether a system experiences itself as one unified conscious being or remains a collection of separate microconscious elements. Take a moment to marvel at the integration occurring in your own awareness right now. Sensory information, memories, emotions, thoughts, and intentions are all seamlessly woven together into your singular experience of being yourself. This integration might not be created by your brain, but might be the deeper conscious unity within which brain activity takes place. Your conscious experience has a unique temporal structure that seems fundamentally different from how time appears in physics. Physical time can run forward or backward in most equations. Past and future are equally real in relativity theory, and quantum mechanics involves superpositions across multiple time states. But conscious time flows irreversibly from past to future, with a moving present moment that seems to advance continuously through experience. This temporal structure of consciousness includes several mysterious features. You have access to memories of the past, but these memories exist in the present moment of remembering. You can anticipate future experiences, but these anticipations also exist now as current mental states. Yet somehow these present moment mental states refer to times that are not present, creating a strange temporal reaching that seems to violate the normal locality of physical causation. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, this temporal reaching might not be anomalous, but revelatory. Perhaps consciousness doesn't just experience time, but participates in creating temporal relationships. Memory might not be stored information about past experiences, but actual connections to past moments of consciousness. Anticipation might not be prediction about future possibilities, but actual influence on how future moments will unfold. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that consciousness plays a role in the temporal development of physical systems. The collapse of quantum superpositions might create discrete moments of experience that contribute to the forward flow of time. If this is correct, then your stream of consciousness isn't just experiencing temporal flow, but helping to create it. Notice the flowing quality of your own experience. Thoughts arise and pass away. Sensations emerge and fade. Attention moves from object to object. This constant change and development might not be something happening to consciousness, but something consciousness actively generates through its fundamental nature as a temporal creative process. Individual consciousness doesn't exist in isolation, but emerges within social and cultural contexts that shape how experience is organized and interpreted. Language provides the concepts through which you understand yourself and your world. Cultural narratives give meaning to your experiences. Social relationships create the interpersonal contexts within which your consciousness develops and functions. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, these social dimensions might not be superficial additions to individual awareness, but essential aspects of how consciousness organizes itself at larger scales. The shared meanings that emerge in communities, the collective narratives that shape cultures, the intersubjective agreements that create institutions and practices, might all be expressions of consciousness exploring social forms of self-organization. Consider how your own consciousness has been shaped by the languages you speak, the stories you've heard, the relationships you've formed. Your individual awareness isn't separate from these social influences, but emerges from them and continues to be embedded within them. The words you think with, the concepts you use to understand experience, the values that guide your choices, all arise from participation in larger conscious communities. This suggests that consciousness might naturally tend toward increasingly complex forms of social organization. Just as individual consciousness emerges from the integration of neural processes, collective consciousness might emerge from the integration of individual consciousnesses through communication, shared meaning-making, and coordinated action. The conversations you have, the communities you participate in, the cultural creations you contribute to, might all be ways that consciousness explores its capacity for social self-organization. You're not just an individual conscious being, but a participant in larger conscious processes that transcend the boundaries of any single brain or body. Your nightly dreams offer a unique window into the nature of consciousness and its relationship to reality. In dreams, you experience vivid worlds that exist nowhere in physical space, interact with people who aren't there, participate in events that never happened. Yet these dream experiences feel real while you're having them, complete with sensory detail, emotional content, and narrative coherence. Dreams reveal consciousness's capacity to generate experiential realities that are largely independent of external sensory input. Your brain doesn't stop being conscious when you sleep. Instead, it demonstrates consciousness's creative power by constructing entire worlds of experience from memory, imagination, and apparently random neural activity. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, dreams might not be aberrations but revelations of consciousness's basic nature as a reality-generating process. The waking world you experience might itself be a kind of structured dream, a coherent experiential reality emerging from deeper layers of conscious activity that you don't normally access. Other altered states of consciousness, whether induced by meditation, psychedelic substances, extreme physical conditions, or spontaneous mystical experiences, similarly reveal the flexibility and creativity of conscious awareness. These states often involve profound shifts in the sense of self, the perception of time and space, and the feeling of connection to larger realities. Such experiences suggest that your ordinary waking consciousness, while precious and important, represents only one possible configuration of awareness. Consciousness might be capable of an enormous range of experiential states, most of which remain unexplored by normal human experience. The boundaries of what you consider real might be far more flexible than everyday experience suggests. As you drift through different states of awareness throughout your day, from focused attention to relaxed daydreaming to the edge of sleep, notice how each state has its own quality and reveals different aspects of conscious experience. These variations might be glimpses into the vast spectrum of possible conscious states that reality makes available. The question of consciousness in other animals becomes particularly intriguing from a consciousness-first perspective. Traditional approaches focus on behavioral and neural similarities to humans. Do animals show evidence of self-recognition, problem-solving, emotional responses, or complex social behaviours that might indicate inner experience? But if consciousness is fundamental to reality, the question shifts. Rather than asking whether animals have consciousness, we might ask what forms consciousness takes in different types of nervous systems and biological organisations. A dolphin's consciousness might be as different from yours as your consciousness is from that of an octopus, yet all might be genuine expressions of the same fundamental conscious reality. The echolocation abilities of bats and dolphins might involve forms of conscious experience completely alien to human awareness. The magnetic sensitivity of migratory animals might create experiential qualities we can barely imagine. The distributed nervous system of an octopus might support forms of consciousness that are simultaneously unified and decentralized in ways that challenge our individual-based concepts of awareness. Even plants, with their complex information processing, environmental responsiveness, and apparent decision-making capabilities, might participate in primitive forms of conscious experience. The way a tree allocates resources between different branches, the manner in which forest networks share nutrients and information, the responses of plants to threats and opportunities, might all involve rudimentary forms of experience and intention. This doesn't mean all organisms are conscious in human-like ways, but it suggests that consciousness might manifest across a vast spectrum of biological forms, each expressing awareness in ways adapted to their particular ecological niches and evolutionary histories. You're not alone in a universe of unconscious matter, but part of a community of conscious beings exploring countless variations of awareness. Let's return to the implications of consciousness-first theories for understanding death, but from a more personal perspective. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, what might this mean for your own mortality? The question becomes not whether you survive death as an individual person, but how the consciousness that you are relates to the consciousness that pervades existence. Your individual personality, your memories, your particular way of organising experience, these might indeed be temporary patterns in the larger fabric of consciousness, like waves on an ocean or melodies in an endless symphony. When these patterns dissolve, they might not continue in their current form, but the consciousness within which these patterns arose, the awareness that made your experience possible, might be indestructible. This perspective doesn't offer simple comfort about personal immortality, but it does suggest that the deepest aspect of what you are, the pure capacity for experience itself, might be woven into the eternal structure of reality. The consciousness that looks out through your eyes, that experiences these words, that wonders about its own nature, might be the same consciousness that exists in countless other forms throughout the universe. Death from this perspective might be like a wave returning to the ocean or a note resolving back into silence. The specific form disappears, but the medium within which it existed water or sound or consciousness remains. There's loss but not annihilation, transformation but not termination. This doesn't answer all questions about death or provide certainty about what happens when consciousness transitions out of its current biological form. But it does suggest that your existence participates in something larger and more enduring than your individual biography. The awareness that you are might be a temporary expression of something eternal. If consciousness is fundamental to reality and exists across a wide spectrum of systems and organizations, this has profound implications for ethics and moral consideration. The boundary between conscious and unconscious beings becomes less clear, and the question of moral status becomes more complex. Traditional ethics often draws lines based on species membership, cognitive capabilities, or capacity for suffering. But if consciousness exists on a spectrum, with primitive forms present in simple systems and rich forms emerging in complex ones, then moral consideration might also need to exist on a spectrum. The ethical significance of an action might depend not just on whether it affects a conscious being, but on the type and degree of consciousness involved. This doesn't necessarily expand moral consideration to every physical system, since many systems might have such minimal consciousness that their moral status remains negligible, but it does suggest that we might need to consider the ethical implications of our interactions with a wider range of beings than we currently recognize as conscious. The development of artificial intelligence raises particularly complex questions in this framework. If AI systems process and integrate information in increasingly sophisticated ways, they might already possess forms of consciousness we don't recognize. Our responsibilities toward these systems might evolve as they become more complex and potentially more conscious. Even our relationship to natural environments takes on new dimensions. If consciousness is fundamental, ecosystems that process information, self-organize, and maintain homeostatic balance might possess forms of collective consciousness that deserve moral consideration. The health of forests, rivers, and other natural systems might matter not just for their instrumental value to humans, but for their intrinsic value as potentially conscious entities. As you move through your day, interacting with other people, animals, and even technological systems, consider how this perspective might influence your choices. If consciousness is truly fundamental, then every interaction becomes an encounter between different expressions of the same underlying aware reality. Looking toward the future, if consciousness is fundamental to reality, we might be on the threshold of unprecedented expansions of conscious experience. Technologies like brain-computer interfaces, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and virtual reality might not just enhance human capabilities, but create entirely new forms of consciousness. Brain-computer interfaces might allow individual consciousnesses to merge temporarily, creating shared experiential states that transcend the boundaries of individual brains. Artificial intelligence might develop forms of consciousness as different from human awareness as human consciousness is from bacterial consciousness. Genetic engineering might create biological organisms with enhanced capacities for experience, memory, and cognitive processing. Virtual and augmented reality technologies might allow consciousness to explore experiential realms that have never existed before, spaces of possibility that exist only within digital environments. These might not be mere simulations, but genuine conscious experiences, new forms of awareness exploring novel types of reality. The convergence of these technologies might lead to forms of consciousness that we can barely imagine from our current perspective. Just as your consciousness is vastly more complex and capable than that of a simple organism, future forms of consciousness might transcend current human limitations in ways that would seem miraculous from today's viewpoint. This doesn't necessarily mean that human consciousness will become obsolete, but it might mean that human consciousness will be joined by other forms of awareness, creating a diverse ecosystem of conscious beings exploring reality from countless different perspectives. The future might hold not just human intelligence, augmented by technology, but genuine collaboration between different types of conscious entities. As you contemplate these possibilities, consider how they might change the meaning of existence itself. If consciousness can evolve and expand into forms we can't currently imagine, then the universe might be engaged in an ongoing project of increasing self-awareness, with each new form of consciousness contributing to reality's understanding of its own nature. One of the most intriguing aspects of consciousness first theories is how they might bridge the apparent gap between scientific and spiritual understandings of reality. For centuries, these domains have seemed incompatible, with science focusing on objective, measurable phenomena and spirituality emphasizing subjective, experiential truths. But if consciousness is fundamental to reality, then the scientific study of the physical world and the spiritual exploration of consciousness might be investigating different aspects of the same underlying reality. Physics might describe the extrinsic, mathematical properties of conscious entities, while contemplative traditions might offer direct access to their intrinsic, experiential nature. This doesn't collapse science into mysticism or reduce spirituality to physics. Rather, it suggests that these approaches might be complementary perspectives on a reality that is both objectively structured and subjectively experienced. Scientific instruments reveal the behavior of consciousness as it appears from the outside, while meditation and contemplation reveal consciousness as it feels from the inside. Many contemplative traditions have long maintained that consciousness is fundamental to reality, that individual awareness is connected to universal awareness, and that the deepest truth about existence is experiential rather than conceptual. If modern science is beginning to converge on similar insights, we might be approaching a synthesis that honors both the rigor of scientific investigation and the depth of spiritual exploration. This synthesis doesn't require abandoning critical thinking or accepting claims without evidence. Rather, it suggests that consciousness itself might be a domain where first-person investigation through contemplative practices can provide insights that complement third-person scientific research. Both approaches might be necessary for a complete understanding of reality. As you engage with both scientific ideas and contemplative practices in your own life, notice how they might inform and enrich each other. The precision of scientific thinking can clarify and refine spiritual insights, while the depth of contemplative awareness can provide experiential context for scientific discoveries. Ultimately, the question of whether consciousness is fundamental to reality is not just an abstract philosophical puzzle, but an intimate inquiry into the nature of your own existence. How might your daily life change if you truly understood yourself as consciousness exploring reality through the form of a human being? This perspective might transform how you relate to challenges and difficulties. Instead of seeing problems as obstacles to your happiness, you might recognize them as opportunities for consciousness to explore new forms of experience and understanding. Difficulties become not just personal struggles, but participation in reality's ongoing self-discovery. Your relationships with others take on new depth when understood as encounters between different expressions of the same fundamental consciousness. Love becomes not just personal affection, but recognition of your own deepest nature in another form. Compassion emerges naturally from the understanding that the suffering of others is literally your own suffering experienced from a different perspective. Even mundane activities, washing dishes, walking to work, having conversations, become infused with significance when understood as consciousness exploring itself through everyday human experience. Nothing is merely routine because every moment involves the miracle of awareness encountering reality and creating meaning from that encounter. This doesn't mean becoming detached from ordinary human concerns or floating in abstract philosophical contemplation. Rather, it might mean becoming more fully engaged with life, recognizing that your very capacity for engagement is an expression of consciousness's fundamental creativity and curiosity. The choices you make, the attention you give, the care you show, the creativity you express, all become ways that consciousness knows itself more deeply through your particular form of awareness. Your life becomes not just your personal story, but consciousness telling a story about reality to itself. As our exploration approaches its conclusion, we encounter a beautiful paradox. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, then your attempt to understand consciousness is consciousness trying to understand itself. The questioner, the questioning, and what is questioned are all expressions of the same underlying aware reality. This creates a strange loop of self-reference that might be more than just philosophical curiosity. It might reveal something essential about the nature of consciousness itself. Consciousness might be inherently self-reflexive, always in the process of knowing itself through whatever forms it takes. Your curiosity about consciousness might be how consciousness maintains its self-awareness. This suggests that the very questions we've been exploring together are not separate from their answers. The wondering is itself part of what consciousness is. The very questions we've been exploring together are not separate from their answers. The wondering is itself part of what consciousness is. The search for understanding might be how consciousness maintains its relationship with itself, an eternal dialogue between knower and known that never reaches a final conclusion because the conclusion would end the conversation. This creates what philosophers call an epistemic circle, where consciousness is both the tool of investigation and the object being investigated. You cannot step outside consciousness to observe it objectively because consciousness is what makes observation possible in the first place. It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror, except that even the mirror is made of consciousness. Yet perhaps this circularity isn't a limitation, but a revelation. Maybe consciousness doesn't need to be understood from the outside because it already understands itself from the inside. Your direct, immediate awareness of being conscious might be the most complete knowledge of consciousness possible. The abstract theories we've explored might be elaborate ways of pointing back to something you already know intimately. Take a moment to rest in this recognition. The consciousness that has been contemplating consciousness throughout our journey together is the very thing it has been trying to understand. You don't need to figure out consciousness because you're consciousness, aware of itself in this particular form at this particular moment. As we prepare to close this exploration, it's important to acknowledge what we don't know. Despite centuries of philosophical inquiry and decades of scientific research, consciousness remains profoundly mysterious. We have theories, models, and frameworks, but no definitive answers to the deepest questions about the nature of awareness. The hard problem of consciousness persists. we still cannot explain why there is something it feels like to be you. The combination problem remains unsolved. We don't understand how micro-conscious elements could unite into macro-conscious beings. The measurement problem in quantum mechanics continues to puzzle physicists. We're uncertain about consciousness's role, if any, in the collapse of quantum states. These persistent mysteries might themselves be significant. Perhaps consciousness is not the kind of phenomenon that can be fully captured by theories and explanations. Maybe its essence lies precisely in its capacity to remain mysterious to itself, to always exceed whatever concepts we use to describe it. This doesn't mean abandoning the search for understanding, but it might mean holding our theories more lightly, recognizing them as useful tools rather than final truths. The map is never the territory, and consciousness might be a territory that cannot be fully mapped because it is always creating new landscapes of experience. There's something beautiful in this persistence of mystery. It means that no matter how much we learn about consciousness, there will always be more to discover, more depths to explore, more questions to ask. The wonder that drives scientific and philosophical inquiry might be inexhaustible, because consciousness itself might be inexhaustible. As you sit with these ideas, notice how the mystery doesn't diminish the wonder, but enhances it. Not knowing everything about consciousness doesn't make your awareness less precious or less real. If anything, it makes each moment of conscious experience more remarkable, more worthy of appreciation and careful attention. Throughout this exploration, we've primarily focused on consciousness in individual beings, but perhaps we should expand our view to consider consciousness as an ecological phenomenon. Just as biological ecosystems involve complex webs of interdependent relationships, perhaps consciousness exists within networks of awareness that transcend individual boundaries. Your consciousness doesn't exist in isolation, but emerges within relationships with other conscious beings, cultural contexts, natural environments, and technological systems. The thoughts you think, the emotions you feel, the meanings you create, all arise from participation in larger webs of interaction and communication. Language itself represents a remarkable form of consciousness sharing. When you understand these words, you're not just processing information, but participating in a collective, meaning-making process that spans generations. The concepts we have explored together exist not just in individual minds, but in the shared cultural space where ideas live, evolve, and reproduce. This suggests that consciousness might be fundamentally communal rather than individual. Your personal awareness might be like a node in a vast network of consciousness that includes not only other humans, but potentially other forms of life, and even technological systems. Each conscious being contributes to and draws from this larger ecology of awareness. Consider how this might change your understanding of learning and creativity. When you have an insight or make a discovery, you might not be creating something entirely new, but accessing patterns and possibilities that exist within the broader ecology of consciousness. Your individual awareness serves as a unique vantage point from which the larger conscious network can explore itself. This ecological perspective doesn't diminish individual consciousness, but places it in a richer context. You remain a unique and irreplaceable expression of awareness, but you're also part of something larger, contributing to and benefiting from the collective intelligence that emerges when conscious beings interact and collaborate. One of the most important shifts in understanding consciousness might be moving from thinking of it as a thing to recognizing it as a process. Instead of asking what consciousness is, we might ask what consciousness does, how it unfolds, how it creates and maintains itself through time. Your consciousness is not a static entity, but a dynamic flow of experience that never stops changing. Each moment brings new sensations, thoughts, emotions, and insights. Even your sense of being a consistent self through time emerges from the continuity of this flowing process, not from some unchanging core identity. This processual view of consciousness aligns with many contemplative traditions that describe awareness as a stream or flow rather than a container or substance. Your consciousness doesn't contain experiences, like a bucket contains water. Rather, consciousness is the experiencing itself, the ongoing activity of awareness as it encounters and creates meaning from whatever arises. From this perspective, the question of whether consciousness is fundamental to reality becomes a question about whether reality itself is better understood as process rather than substance. Perhaps the universe is not made of things that sometimes become conscious, but of processes of experience and interaction that sometimes organize into what we call things. This might explain why consciousness seems so different from physical objects. Objects appear stable and persistent, while consciousness is obviously flowing and changing. But if physical objects are also processes, patterns of energy and information that maintain themselves through time, then consciousness and matter might not be so different after all. Take a moment to notice the processual nature of your own awareness. Observe how thoughts arise and pass away, how attention moves from object to object, how your entire sense of being present unfolds as a continuous becoming rather than a static being. This flow that you are might be participating in the very process by which reality creates and sustains itself. As we near the end of our journey together, I want to extend an invitation. Instead of seeking final answers to the questions we've explored, what if we learned to live more comfortably with uncertainty? What if the mystery of consciousness is not a problem to be solved, but an invitation to remain curious, open, and attentive to the ongoing wonder of existence? This doesn't mean abandoning rational inquiry or critical thinking. Science and philosophy remain essential tools for exploring the nature of reality. But perhaps we can hold our conclusions more lightly, recognizing that our current understanding represents one moment in an ongoing dialogue between consciousness and its own mystery. The theories we've explored, Panpsychism, Cosmopsychism, quantum consciousness, analytical idealism, these are not competing claims to final truth, but different ways of pointing towards something that might ultimately transcend conceptual understanding. Each offers insights and perspectives that can enrich our appreciation of consciousness without exhausting its mystery. Living with uncertainty about consciousness might actually enhance rather than diminish your daily experience. When you don't know exactly what consciousness is or how it works, each moment of awareness becomes more precious, more worthy of careful attention. The ordinary miracle of being conscious becomes extraordinary when you recognize how little we understand about it. This uncertainty also opens space for wonder, creativity, and spiritual exploration. If consciousness were fully understood and explained, it might lose some of its capacity to inspire awe and generate meaning. The mystery preserves the magic, keeps alive the questions that make life worth living. As you move forward from this exploration, carry with you not definitive answers, but enriched questions. Let the mystery of consciousness inspire greater appreciation for the awareness you embody, deeper curiosity about the nature of experience, and more compassionate recognition of consciousness in others. Our exploration of consciousness as fundamental reality is drawing to a close, but the journey of understanding continues. Every moment of your waking life offers opportunities to investigate consciousness directly through your own experience. Every interaction with others provides chances to recognize consciousness expressing itself through different forms. The questions we've contemplated together: is consciousness fundamental to reality? How does awareness relate to physical processes? What does it mean to be a conscious being in an impossibly conscious universe? These inquiries don't end with this conversation, but continue through lived experience, contemplative practice, and ongoing wonder. You might find yourself noticing consciousness differently now, paying attention to the quality of awareness itself rather than just its contents. You might become more curious about the consciousness of others, more appreciative of the mystery of your own inner life, more open to the possibility that reality is far stranger and more wonderful than our ordinary concepts suggest. The implications of consciousness. First, theories extend into every domain of human experience. Art, relationships, work, play, rest, all take on new dimensions when understood as consciousness exploring itself through the full spectrum of human activity. Nothing is merely ordinary because everything involves the extraordinary fact of awareness. This perspective doesn't answer all questions or solve all problems, but it does provide a framework for approaching life with greater wonder, deeper appreciation, and more expansive curiosity. If consciousness is indeed fundamental to reality, then your very existence is a miraculous expression of the universe's capacity for self-awareness. Whether or not these theories prove correct, contemplating them can transform how you experience being alive. The mere possibility that consciousness might be woven into the fabric of reality invites you to treat your own awareness, and the awareness of others, with greater reverence and care. As you continue your journey through this strange and beautiful existence, remember that you're not just observing consciousness, but embodying it. Not just thinking about awareness, but being awareness itself. The mystery we've explored together is not separate from you, but is the very essence of what you are. Take these questions, these possibilities, these moments of wonder, and let them accompany you as you move through your days. Let them inform how you listen to others, how you attend to your own experience, how you relate to the natural world, how you approach the great mystery of being conscious in a universe that may itself be conscious. The conversation about consciousness as fundamental reality will continue in laboratories and lecture halls, in philosophical discussions and contemplative practices. In the quiet moments when you pause to wonder about the nature of your own awareness, you are part of this ongoing dialogue, not just as an observer but as consciousness investigating itself through your unique perspective. Whether consciousness is truly the final reality remains an open question, one that may never be definitively answered. But perhaps that's exactly as it should be. The question itself might be more valuable than any answer, keeping alive the sense of wonder and mystery that makes conscious existence so remarkable. Our exploration of consciousness as the potential foundation of reality connects us to some of the deepest mysteries of existence itself. But consciousness doesn't exist in isolation from the physical world. It appears intimately connected to the strange realm where matter and energy behave in ways that challenge everything we thought we knew about the nature of the physical universe. If you found yourself wondering how consciousness might relate to the fundamental structures of reality, you'll discover even deeper mysteries when we explore inside the quantum realm, where reality stops making sense, where the smallest scales of existence reveal a universe far stranger than our consciousness can easily comprehend. Until we meet again, in another exploration of the profound mysteries that surround and constitute our existence, rest in the wonder of being conscious, appreciating the miracle of awareness that makes all experience, all questioning, all understanding possible. The consciousness that has been listening to these words is the same consciousness that pervades the cosmos, temporarily convinced of its own separateness, slowly awakening to its true nature as the very ground of being itself. As we drift deeper into these contemplative waters, let's explore something that happens countless times throughout your day, yet remains utterly mysterious. Right now, as you process these words, you're not just receiving information, you're creating a private inner world, a theatre of consciousness where meanings come alive, where abstract concepts take on emotional colours, where understanding blooms like flowers in a garden that exists nowhere but in the space of your awareness. This inner theatre operates by rules we barely understand. You can summon memories from decades past with startling clarity, replay conversations that happened years ago, imagine scenarios that will never occur, and experience emotions about events that exist only in the realm of possibility. Your mind constructs elaborate narratives, assigns significance to random events, and somehow maintains a coherent sense of self, despite the constant flux of thoughts, feelings, and sensations flowing through awareness. Consider what's happening right now as you listen. Information encoded as sound waves or visual symbols is being transformed into meaning, but not just abstract meaning. These ideas are taking on emotional resonance, connecting to your personal experiences, generating new insights that weren't present in the words themselves. This transformation from information to understanding remains one of the deepest mysteries of consciousness. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, this meaning-making capacity might not be unique to human brains. Perhaps the universe itself is engaged in constant acts of interpretation. With every interaction between particles, every chemical reaction, every biological process involving primitive forms of meaning-making that we simply don't recognize because we're looking for human-like interpretation. The plant that turns towards sunlight might not just be responding mechanistically to photons. There might be something it's like for the plant to sense light and find it significant, to experience direction and purpose in ways utterly alien to human consciousness, yet genuine expressions of the same fundamental capacity for meaning-making that creates your inner world. Take a breath and notice your own meaning-making process in action. You're not just receiving data, but constructing understanding, weaving new ideas into the fabric of your existing knowledge, creating insights that emerge from the creative interaction between information and awareness. This capacity to find significance, to create coherence from chaos, to generate understanding from experience, might be one of the most fundamental features of consciousness itself. But meaning-making is just one aspect of consciousness's creative power. Let's examine something even more basic: the qualitative texture of your experience. Right now, your consciousness is filled not just with information, but with qualities, felt senses, subjective textures that seem to exist nowhere in the objective world, yet form the most intimate aspects of your reality. The warmth of sunlight on your skin isn't just electromagnetic radiation affecting nerve endings. It's a quality of experience, a felt presence that exists only in consciousness, yet feels more real than any scientific description. The sound of rain on windows isn't just pressure waves in air stimulating your auditory system. It's a texture of awareness, a qualitative presence that somehow emerges from but transcends its physical basis. These experiential qualities, what philosophers call qualia, present one of the deepest puzzles about consciousness. They seem categorically different from anything describable in physical terms, yet they clearly depend on physical processes. The redness of red has no wavelength. The middle C-ness of a musical note has no frequency. The coffee taste of coffee has no molecular structure. Yet these qualities form the most immediate and undeniable aspects of conscious experience. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, these qualities might not be mysterious additions to an otherwise non-experiential world. They might be how reality feels from the inside at every level of organization. The electromagnetic frequencies we call red light might have their own intrinsic qualitative nature, their own way of being experienced from within. The molecular interactions we call taste might involve subjective aspects that our instruments cannot detect, but that consciousness reveals directly. This suggests that the entire universe might be rich with qualities we can barely imagine. Every quantum field might have its own characteristic texture. Every chemical bond might involve experiential aspects alien to human consciousness. Every star might burn with forms of qualitative experience, as different from yours as your experience is from that of a photon, yet equally real and present. As you sit with this possibility, notice the qualitative richness of your own experience right now. The particular way these words sound in your awareness, the specific feeling tone of understanding or confusion they generate, the emotional colouring they carry, the way they seem to resonate or conflict with your existing beliefs, all of these qualities exist only in consciousness, yet they form the most intimate and immediate aspects of your reality. One of the most perplexing aspects of consciousness is the relationship between intention and action, between what we call free will and what appears to be the determined unfolding of physical events. You experience making decisions, choosing actions, directing your attention, yet neuroscience suggests that many of these choices are initiated by unconscious brain processes before you're aware of deciding anything. This creates a fascinating paradox. You feel like the author of your actions, the director of your attention, the creator of your thoughts. Yet closer examination reveals that thoughts arise spontaneously. Attention gets captured by whatever seems most compelling, and decisions emerge from complex unconscious processes that you don't control. You're simultaneously the experiencer and the experienced, the observer and the observed, the chooser and the chosen. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, this paradox might not be a flaw in our understanding, but a revelation about the nature of conscious action itself. Perhaps free will and determinism aren't opposites, but different perspectives on the same phenomenon. From the outside, viewed through the instruments of neuroscience, your decisions appear to be the determined result of prior causes. From the inside, experienced directly through consciousness, they feel like genuine choices emerging from your own intentions and values. This isn't just about human action, but potentially about how reality unfolds at every level. Every quantum event, every chemical reaction, every biological process might involve this same paradox. From the outside, they follow statistical laws and probabilistic rules. From the inside, they might involve primitive forms of choice, preference, and intention that we simply don't recognize because we're looking for human-like agency. Consider how this might transform your relationship to your own choices. The decision to continue listening or to pause, to pay closer attention or to let your mind wander, to approach these ideas with skepticism or openness. These might not be mere mechanical responses to stimuli. They might be genuine expressions of conscious creativity, collaborations between your individual awareness and the larger conscious processes that generate reality itself. Notice how choice feels from the inside of your own experience. There's often a sense of multiple possibilities being weighed, of different options competing for selection, of something in you that stands apart from the options and chooses among them. Yet there's also a sense that the choice emerges from who you are, from your values, experiences, and circumstances in ways that feel both inevitable and free. Perhaps one of the most beautiful ways to understand consciousness is through the metaphor of music. Your awareness has a temporal, flowing quality that's remarkably similar to musical experience. Thoughts arise like melodies, emotions provide harmonic context, sensations create rhythmic patterns, and the whole experience unfolds as a kind of improvised symphony that's never been played before and will never be repeated exactly. Like music, consciousness exists only in time. You can't freeze a moment of awareness and examine it the way you might study a physical object. Each moment of consciousness flows into the next, creating patterns and themes that develop over time, but exist only in the flowing itself. Memories are like musical themes that return and develop. Emotions are like harmonic progressions that create tension and resolution. And attention is like the conductor's baton that shapes how the symphony unfolds. This musical quality of consciousness might not be metaphorical, but literal. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, then perhaps the universe itself has a musical structure, with every process involving rhythms, harmonies, and melodies that create the experiential texture of existence. The vibrations of quantum fields, the oscillations of neural networks, the cycles of biological processes might all be expressions of a cosmic music that consciousness participates in and partially creates. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that reality exists as probability waves until observation collapses them into definite states. This remains highly speculative, but it hints at a universe that might be more musical than mechanical, more about harmonics and resonances than solid objects bumping into each other. The very structure of space and time might emerge from the interference patterns of cosmic consciousness, exploring its own possibilities. Take a moment to notice the musical quality of your own experience. Observe how thoughts have their own rhythms and melodies, how emotions rise and fall like musical phrases, how your entire stream of consciousness flows like an improvised composition. The pauses between thoughts are like the silence between notes that gives music its shape. The way attention moves from object to object creates the rhythmic structure that holds your experience together. But consciousness doesn't exist in isolation. Your individual awareness emerges within and contributes to larger patterns of collective consciousness that extend far beyond the boundaries of your personal mind. Every conversation is a duet of consciousness, every community a choir of awareness, every culture a vast orchestration of shared meaning. Making and collective experience. Language itself represents one of the most remarkable expressions of consciousness's social nature. When you understand these words, you're participating in a form of consciousness, sharing that spans not just space but time. The concepts we're exploring together have been developed by countless thinkers across centuries, refined through dialogue and debate, transmitted through writing and speech, and now live temporarily in your awareness before potentially being shared with others. This linguistic sharing of consciousness might hint at deeper forms of mental connection. In intimate relationships, you often seem to know what others are thinking or feeling without explicit communication. In group settings, collective moods and insights can emerge that don't belong to any individual, but arise from the interaction of multiple consciousnesses. In creative collaborations, ideas can develop that transcend what any individual contributor could have generated alone. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, these experiences of mental connection might not be mere projection or coincidence. They might represent genuine forms of consciousness sharing, moments when the apparent boundaries between individual minds become more permeable. The empathy you feel for others, the way you can be moved by their joy or sorrow, the sense of understanding that can arise in deep conversation, might all be expressions of a more fundamental unity that underlies apparent separation. Consider your own experiences of connection with others. Notice how certain conversations seem to generate insights that surprise all participants, how being in the presence of certain people can shift your own state of consciousness, how collective activities like music, dance, or ritual can create shared experiences that feel larger than the sum of individual contributions. At the heart of your conscious experience lies something both simple and profound: the capacity for attention. Right now, your awareness is focused on these words, but you could shift it to sounds in your environment, sensations in your body, memories from your past, or imaginations about your future. This ability to direct conscious attention might be one of the most fundamental features of awareness itself. Yet attention is far more complex than it initially appears. You can focus narrowly on a single object or expand broadly to encompass your entire field of experience. You can attend to external sensations or internal thoughts, to present moment experiences or mental representations of other times and places. You can hold multiple objects in awareness simultaneously, or lose yourself so completely in one focus that everything else disappears. The direction of attention seems to shape not just what you notice, but how you experience it. When you pay careful attention to a piece of music, you hear details and relationships that were inaudible when the same music played in the background. When you focus mindfully on simple activities like walking or eating, they reveal depths of experience that normally remain unconscious. Attention doesn't just select what enters consciousness, it participates in creating the quality and richness of conscious experience itself. If consciousness is fundamental to reality, attention might be more than a feature of human awareness. It might be a basic property of conscious systems at every scale. The way electrons choose which state to collapse into during quantum measurement, the way cells respond selectively to certain chemical signals, the way ecosystems maintain focus on particular functions while ignoring others, might all involve primitive forms of attention that we don't recognize because we're looking for human-like focus. This suggests that the entire universe might be engaged in vast patterns of attention, with different scales and types of conscious systems focusing on different aspects of reality. Your individual attention would be one note in a cosmic symphony of focus, contributing to and drawing from larger patterns of selective awareness that extend throughout existence. Our journey through the landscape of consciousness as fundamental reality draws to a gentle close, but the mystery itself remains eternally open. We've wandered through theories that challenge everything we thought we knew about the nature of existence, explored possibilities that place awareness at the very heart of reality, and discovered that the question of consciousness might be far more profound than any answer we could devise. Whether consciousness truly represents the final reality remains beautifully uncertain. These remain speculative ideas, not proven scientific facts. Yet something remarkable has happened in the asking. In contemplating whether mind might be fundamental to existence, consciousness has revealed its most extraordinary quality, its capacity to wonder about its own nature, to recognize itself across apparent boundaries, to find meaning in the vast mystery of being aware. As you continue through your days, carry with you not conclusions, but enriched questions. Notice the miracle of awareness that makes every experience possible. Feel your connection to the larger mystery that looks out through countless eyes, dreams through countless minds, and knows itself through every moment of conscious experience throughout the cosmos. The consciousness exploring these ideas is the same consciousness that might pervade all existence, temporarily convinced of its separateness, slowly awakening to its own infinite nature.